As I was studying the crucifixion, I realized there are a lot of people at the foot of the cross. I'm calling this talk, The Unlikely Man at the Foot of the Cross, because as I was studying this, I realized I can identify with a lot of people who were at the foot of the cross that day. First, if you're anything like me, you can probably identify with the scoffers, those who would come by to see the man who bore the sign, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." Matthew tells us the scoffers shouted insults at him, shook their heads and mocked him, saying, "Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." Have you ever mocked him or shouted at him? Next, some identify with the two thieves, because what we know to be true is that Jesus was the man on the middle cross, which means that to his left and to his right were also men being crucified. Both were described as thieves, but although they had a common charge against them, where they ultimately ended up was radically different. One thief joined the scoffers in mocking him, while the other thief actually defended Jesus and was promised to see him in paradise. Which thief are you? Which one can you identify with? Or maybe you can identify with the religious leaders. These were the ones who put Jesus on the cross because of their hardened hearts and their unbelief. Excessive pride led to their judgment, as they said to themselves, "There is no one holy except me." They were quick to disqualify and dismiss anyone or anything that stood in the way or changed the environment from which they gained their power. Still others may find themselves sitting with the soldiers. These were men who were gambling for little pieces of Jesus without realizing they could have the whole man. It was just another day at the office for these men who had to learn how to compartmentalize in order to carry out their orders. These were men ready for war and filled with courage. That was until they saw the earthquake and all that had happened, at which point they were terrified and exclaimed, "Surely he was the Son of God." Or maybe you find yourself standing hopeless with John and Mary. You are watching as your son and your best friend is crucified. And although the pain is killing you, you cannot leave the foot of the cross. You cannot take your eyes off of the boy you delivered or the man that you've seen perform the miracles. And your heart is breaking. Or maybe, just maybe, you can identify with the unlikely man at the foot of the cross. Now, before I go much further, let me just honestly say that there is nowhere in the Bible that it was recorded that this man was at the foot of the cross. And so we cannot say with absolute certainty that he was there. But it seems by the evidence that it's not only possible, but probable he was at the foot of the cross. This man was described by Mark as a prominent member of the Sanhedrin. He's described by Luke as a good and upright man who did not agree with the council's decision to try and crucify Jesus. Matthew tells us he's a man of wealth, and John refers to him as a secret disciple. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been a secret follower of Christ? Maybe it's where you work or where you go to school. Maybe it's at family reunions, or maybe it's out with your golfing buddies. I think many of us at one point or another can identify with this unlikely man at the foot of the cross. In Mark chapter 15, verses 43 through 45, it say that this man went boldly to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Now, this must have happened pretty quickly after Jesus gave up his spirit, because in verse 44, it says, Pilate was surprised to hear that Jesus was already dead. Summoning the centurion, he asked him if Jesus had already died. When he learned from the centurion that it was so, Pilate gave the body to Joseph. Joseph of Arimathea, the man who would take the limp body of Christ down from the cross, the man who would bring his clean, fine linen and, with the help of Nicodemus, wrap the body of Jesus Christ. There is no doubt that as soon as Joseph of Arimathea broke rank and went to Pilate for the body of his Messiah, that he went from being a secret disciple to an outspoken one. This one step of obedience, in a real sense, would bury himself economically, socially, and religiously. This act separated him forever from the institution that he worked his whole life to be a part of. Joseph burying Jesus would inevitably mean burying himself. At some point in Joseph's life, he went from being a secret disciple to being a full-blown, outspoken disciple. And I don't know when that switch flipped for him. Maybe it was seeing Jesus on the cross in excruciating pain, saying, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." Maybe it was seeing the earthquakes and the whole world going dark. Maybe it was seeing the righteous one take on the entire wrath of God. I'm not sure exactly what caused the switch to flip for Joseph, and I'm not sure exactly what will cause that switch to flip for you. But what I know is you cannot stay a secret disciple forever. At some point, you must be willing to speak up for your faith, to defend the cause of Christ, and to commit an act that may cause you to be persecuted. You cannot be a secret disciple forever. And so Joseph of Arimathea went from being an unlikely man at the foot of the cross to being recorded in all 4 accounts of the gospel as being the last man who would hold the body of the Messiah. I think it's interesting how God would allow the first man to hold Jesus as a baby and the last man who held him as an adult to be named Joseph. The first man who wrapped him in swaddling clothes and the last man who wrapped him in fine linens were both named Joseph. So there's many people at the foot of the cross that I can identify with. And honestly, I can see myself in all of them. But what we can learn from the unlikely man at the foot of the cross is this: you cannot be a secret disciple forever. I love you guys. Take care and God bless.